Hello all and welcome to today's live session. My name's Ashley Lloyd. I'll be hosting this session today. The session is going to be focusing on assignment writing guidance, and basically the main aim today is to provide you, the learners, with guidance on assignment writing, specifications and assignment briefs, as suggested by one of our learners. Hopefully by the end of this you'll be really confident to get started. Okay, so there is a chat area for here. If you want to write a message, or you want me to slow down, or you want me to, yes, Luca, or you want me to answer a question, that's perfectly fine. But I will stop at the first natural pause in the presentation. I will also be asking you to get involved, to interact with me. So in interactive polls, if, for example, I got a low answer, and I feel like I need to elaborate further on a topic, I will do there. Okay, so let us get started. Okay, so are we all happy that we can see the screen? You can all hear me okay? If you'd like to just leave a note in the comments box for me and let me know that you are all with me and you can hear me okay. Okay, I'm going to assume we're all okay there then. Right, okay, so when you start a new unit with Unicourse, you will have already had an initial assessment and an introduction call. In that introduction call, usually with myself, because I am the main tutor for the ILM courses, I am the primary tutor, but we do have secondary tutors and other tutors that will help out if I'm on annual leave, so don't worry about that. But as the main tutor, I like to go through useful resources within the introduction call. Within them useful resources is 2 documents I'd like to make sure that when you are starting on a unit and you are having a little look at the resources for that specific unit in that toggle, that you are looking at these areas. Now, I know that people that sign up to our learning courses have worked academically in the past. That is perfectly fine, and they might be used to writing assignments on a regular basis, so might not need to use the assignment template or the ILM assessment terminology. But basically these resources have been developed to help learners that are new to these areas really. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go onto the assignment template and just show you 1 or 2 tips before we get started. This is where you'll find the assignment template under the ILM specification for that specific unit. So whether that's level 3 or level 5 qualification on any of the programs, the assignment template will be found here. So just bear with me 1 second. Okay, hopefully you can all see this okay as we talk now. Okay, so this is the assignment template. So I'm just going to enable editing to start off with. What I suggest for everyone, you start on a unit, so say you're starting on 202, 308, 405, whatever. You're saying to yourself, I'm going to allocate myself some time for learning here. The first thing that I'm going to do is set myself a folder up in my Dropbox. And the first thing I'm going to put in that folder is the assignment template. Or if you don't use the template, just the start and cover page for your assignment. So you will put the unit number, the unit title, your name, and you leave the date till the end. When you submit, you'll add that date to that. For all that have never used a template like this before, this contents page can be updated, okay? So let me give you an example. Let's say we are focusing on, unit, say 308, understanding leadership, because I do think that's a good starting point for learners to start on, because it introduces you to the leadership and management theory and philosophies. So what you're going to focus on is what subheadings you're going to be putting out for that. So your subheadings will link back to the assignment criteria, and I'll break that down a bit further for you in a minute, but you can use elements of the assignment criteria to write the introduction. You can also use subheadings. So say, for example, you've written your introduction and you're thinking of writing your first, let's just say it's understanding leadership is your first subheading. Now, what you'll do is you'll highlight that. You will go to the home toggle. Then you will highlight it at whatever heading you want, whether you want to be a main heading or a subheading. And what you can actually do then at the end is you can scroll yourself back up and you can update the contents page, okay? So how you do that is click on the contents page, click on update table, update entire table, and as you can see, you've got another subheading in there. Now, the same can be said for appendices. So any evidence that you want to add, you will add before the reference list. So the reference list always goes at the end. So any evidence such as a personal development plan, a self-assessment tool can be added as Appendix 1, Appendix 2, same, you know, it might say Appendix 1, personal development plan, Appendix 2, self-assessments from colleague, and again, update table, and it will add the numbers on the side as well. So, you know, you've got a really good format for your assignment there, okay? I hope that that has been useful. Let's bring you back to the presentation. Okay, so the ILM assessment terminology is basically a breakdown of the descriptors in the questions. So if you haven't worked academically for a long time and you're a little bit unsure about what the difference between describe or explain and conclude or evaluate, the great thing about ILM is they provide you with many resources to answer the questions, and they basically break down what they're looking for in their criteria. Okay, so now let's break down the assignment format. Okay, so firstly, we have the cover page, which I've just pointed out to you. Then an introduction, which, you know, an introduction is really important in your assignment format. Then you've got your main body, which will include subheadings. Your conclusion and recommendation will basically look back at the introduction and conclude or recommend on any thoughts that you've found or you've learned throughout that assignment. So it's not a conclusion for every section, although some questions might ask you to conclude on a specific area or provide a recommendation on a specific leadership style. You know, the conclusion in this assignment template is to conclude what you've found. So just remember that it's got to be cohesive. It's got to have, you know, a beginning, a middle and an end to your assignment, and it's got to feel like a full rounded assignment, you know, so it's easy to read. Then your reference list, as mentioned to everyone in the induction, we follow the Harvard Referencing Guide, and there's 2 resources on Moodle for you to use there. There's a PDF resource and there's also a video resource. Again, appendices are really important for any vocational qualification, as it evidences that you can actually do and you're showing competence for what you have learned throughout that unit. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just ask you a couple of questions now, just to make sure you're all still with me, and just so I can get a bit of a understanding about who's with me and what you've done in the past. Okay, so can I just I'll ask you the first question. If you just answer the questions as honestly as you can for me, please. So Is anybody completely new to assignment writing? And just click yes, no, you haven't written in a long time, or you've written reports but not assignments. And then the second question, has anyone used the Harvard referencing system in the past? And that's a yes, no, maybe something similar, or yes, but a long time ago. So I'll just wait a couple of minutes for you to let me know your thoughts on your questions. Sorry, and the final question for that section, what does an introduction do in an assignment? Does it tell the reader about the writer? Does it set the scene for the assignment? Does it introduce the reader to the main subject, or none of the above?
Just 1 minute.
We'll just wait one more minute. There's one or two people that hasn't responded yet. If you're unsure as well, that's perfectly fine. Okay, so the results are in. So we have, a couple that are completely new to assignment writing. One that said they haven't written in a long time. One that said that they're used to writing assignments. So we've got a range of people there. The next system, some have used the Harvard referencing guide, some haven't. And the people that haven't, there's many tools out there. If our tools aren't good enough for you, if you feel like you want to use a more up-to-date tool, such as there's apps out there, there's websites you can use, and once you get into the swing of writing them, it's quite easy to do. All I want to see for your first assignment is that you're giving it a go, and obviously trying to avoid plagiarism at all points. Paraphrasing is key there. So what does the introduction do in the assignment? And yeah, you are all, right there. It sets the scene for what you're going to do. So, use elements of the assignment brief to write that introduction. If it asks you to provide a description of something, a description of different leadership styles, in your introduction, you might say, within this assignment, I will be describing X, Y, and Z in this way. You might want to elaborate a bit further on that, but you can use elements of the criteria in your introduction to say what you're about to do. Well, people should be able to read your introduction and know exactly what you're going to do in the assignment. Okay, brilliant. I'll come to more questions in a second. So for those of you who are writing the first assignment, I've often mentioned an abstract. Now, an abstract in a research paper allows the reader to get a short summary of the paper. It's a bit different for ILM and for these courses in the way that we see it. I think for these qualifications, an abstract in the first allows me to be able to see, I'm the internal quality insurer and the external verifier. It allows us to be able to see basically what organisation you work for, what industry, and where about you fit into that organisational structure. Now, I've had in the past that learners have had a couple of different leadership and management roles in different organisations, and it's perfectly fine for you to use different organisations to demonstrate competence in your working examples. So an example would be, I've worked in probably 3 or 4 different leadership roles in the past and management roles in the past. When I've gone on to complete different qualifications that I have, I might think that innovation and change, if I was to pick a unit on that, that might be more, I might be able to link that more to a job that I did 4 years ago than the one that I'm actually doing now. You know, it depends. If you want to provide a bit of context for your assignment, you can set yourself a bit of a, it'll give a short overview of what the organisation is you're going to be talking about, because it doesn't necessarily need to be the current organisation that you're working in right now. Because another example could be, you might not be dealing with strategy in the current organisation, you might be dealing with people management mostly, but you might pick a unit that focuses on project management or strategic planning, for example, managing change, but you might not be doing that where you are now, but you might want to base it on something you did in the past and maybe do an improvement plan. You can do that, but just provide some context for where you're sitting, because I might say, oh, they're not really doing that at the moment, so where's that come from? So just providing a short paragraph, that's perfectly fine for us to understand there, okay? So let's just provide you with a couple of definitions. So the first thing that you'll see on your unit toggle will be the unit specification. Now, this is basically the backbone and basically gives you a full breakdown as to what the assignment is about. And included in that, you know, it is everything you need, from the guided learning hours to the credit value, to the level of it, to what you'll do, and you know what the criteria is. The assignment brief informs you of the tasks that you're going to do, so the questions, and basically is everything that you need to complete in order to finish that unit. The learning outcomes are broken down. So usually there's about 3 or 4. In the lower level units, there might only be 2 or 3. In the higher level units with the more credit values, the higher the complexity, sometimes there's 5 or 6 learning outcomes. The learning outcomes are usually when that topic slightly changes subject a little bit. So, for example, on Unit 400, for example, the first aspect focuses on goals and objectives. So that will be learning outcome 1. The second learning outcome, I think off the top of my mind, focuses on the middle manager and their interpersonal skills or communication skills. So that's like it changes into a slightly different subject. And then the third one's on like reflective practice and self-assessments and stuff. So that's like a different learning outcome. So sometimes I say to people that don't look at the assignment fully as a whole. Yeah, okay, plan maybe in your mind what you're going to do about it. Or if you're going to allocate yourself, say, a couple of hours a week, maybe say, well, this week I'm going to complete this learning outcome, and this week I'll look at this learning outcome. And then you can break it down that way, and you might find it easier to complete the assignment to be doing it in chunks. The sufficiency descriptors are basically to inform you what you have to do. So ILM basically say on every assignment brief, typical standard that if replicated across the whole submission would produce a referral, borderline pass, or a good pass. All that basically means is the sufficiency descriptors break down what the descriptor of the question is about. Now let me talk to you a little bit further on that. So firstly, let me just break down the indicative content. So the indicative content will be found on the unit specification on the 2nd or 3rd page, depending. What this is it's basically telling you everything that needs to be researched and included in your assignment for you to get top marks. Now, near enough every unit now has got an information pack. If it hasn't, they're being adapted or changed, or they're basically formulated from the indicative content with exercises and workbooks and small challenges for you to go away and think about. But, you know, that they're created from this indicative content. But you can always go away yourself and, you know, research these areas and have a little think about how you want to go about, you know, looking at the assignment as a whole for planning purposes. So looking at the descriptors, so let me just bring you onto an example assignment brief. So I'm just going to pull you off here 1 second. So let's look at, we'll look at unit 400 as it can be used for, yeah, it can be used for level 3 and level 4. So when we talk about descriptors, we talk about the level of description within the question. So, for example, what ILM usually tend to do is start out with the level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5. You're building on your knowledge, you're building on your expertise, okay? So this diagram is taken from Benjamin Bloom, who's basically built this taxonomy and looks at the hierarchical classification of different levels of thinking. Now, when I'm talking about different levels of thinking, I'm thinking about building upon knowledge. So usually what happens in assignment is they might ask you to first start with outlining something or describing something or providing a definition for something. So as you can see at the bottom of the triangle, it's about the lower level of thinking, to sort of like remembering, you know, finding out relevant information, but not really thinking about that information just yet. You're just defining it, duplicating it, repeating it, or stating a fact, okay? Then the way Bloom looks at the taxonomy and the knowledge building is he then thinks about understanding something and then applying it, then analysing it, evaluating it. And when you're thinking about creating, you're thinking about critical thinking and looking outside the box there. So there's different elements of thinking. Now, with the learning outcomes, I know they say that they change subjects slightly, but they usually build upon knowledge in that way. So if you're looking at this one, you're looking at the first question asks you to describe in this learning outcome. The second one asks you to evaluate. So as you can see, it's building upon your knowledge. But when you look actually in the pass and the good pass criteria, it does ask you to elaborate further upon that description. So, for example, it will ask you to, you know, provide a basic explanation of goals and objectives within the pass, and doesn't really say that you need to talk about short-term, long-term, smart objectives, anything like that. So you're just providing a basic description. But for the good pass, it gives you tips on how to provide a detailed description. So it'll usually tell you whether it wants maybe say 2 or 3 ideas or descriptions, or it might tell you that you want you to look at a specific tool or technique that you need to describe, like, or, you know, looking at the link between the short and the long-term objectives for this one. So then it might ask you to evaluate. So it's building upon that knowledge. So it's asking you to do some research, provide a description. Now it wants you to evaluate a little bit further and think a little bit further about stuff, applying, you know, 2 sides of the story in your opinion, or conclusion and recommendation in this area. So as you can see, it's building upon your knowledge for that specific area. So for the lower level units, or, you know, the lower CV ones, or the credit value, you might just be looking to outline, describe, explain. For the higher level units, within, you know, the higher that you go, it might be looking for you to do some critical evaluation, critical reflection. You're going to be appraising information that you found. You might be examining models and theories. So it builds upon your knowledge in that way. Also, say if you were to do a level 3, say you're doing a level 3 diploma or certificate, and you do your level 3 units. Now, I always recommend to do a level 4 one at least at the end. You're going to be looking at building upon your knowledge. But, you know, for your first unit, you might want to just aim for your pass. And then you might want to look at building on the knowledge that you've got. So an example would be you've used your leadership styles, you've done your research on different leadership theories and philosophies. And then you can build upon that in your next unit. So if you decide to pick a unit then on, or your next unit follows on motivational theory, for example, and you want to link that with, you might say, referring back to assignment 308 and the research I did on Haisley and Blanchard's leadership model, I have found that this you know, links in with this motivational theory. So you can use the knowledge that you've learned in a first assignment and build upon it. I mean, a brilliant example of that would be one of our learners that have finished a 3 diploma now referred back to 4 of their assignments in their final assignment. And it basically just shows ILM and ourselves of everything that you've learned to be able to meet, to be able to use everything that you've learned to create an assignment. And she got 99% on her last assignment. So it shows that you're building on knowledge and you're using the assignment criteria. Right, let me bring you back to the presentation. Bear with me. Okay, so we are back. So we're going to move on to the actual assignment brief now. So the assignment brief that we've just been talking about, and I've broke down the descriptors and the sufficiency descriptors on there for the pass and the good pass. It's important when you submit on that assignment brief that you provide the details, so your details, that you provide your details at the start for verification purposes. But it also includes, so on the first page, you'll have the task. So it'll break down the task and what you need to do. So an example of that will be the Unit 400. It basically tells you the purpose of the unit is to demonstrate an understanding of the middle management role and be able to plan your own development. So it basically tells you to break down the task. There's always a note on there as well that basically says try and relate it to the current organisation or an organisation that you've got experience in. It then gives you an estimated word count. Now, this, you won't be penalised if you go slightly over or slightly under, as everyone's writing style is different. So, you know, it's perfectly fine, and any appendices won't be included in your word count, and your abstract won't be included if you was to include one in there as well. But try and stay around about that benchmarked amount, okay? Subheadings, as I've just mentioned, ILM loves to see subheadings so they can break down an assignment. And to be fair, it's good for you as well to be able to keep, you know, refer back to and just make sure, you know, when you're writing your assignment template or when you're starting your assignment, create them subheadings at first, and then you can keep referring back to them. And then obviously the assignment criteria, which I've just gone on to, is an important point of that assignment brief. So meeting the higher grade, I have a couple of recommendations here for meeting the higher grade. Firstly, if you want to meet the higher grade, most of the time it asks for your thoughts. It'll ask you for a recommendation, a conclusion, or a judgment on that specific question. So an example would be, oh, sorry. Yeah, so an example would be, let me just bring myself back. On Unit 400, for the first question, it says, for the first learning outcome, it says to provide a conclusion or recommendation. Now, for the higher level unit, it will sometimes say justify your conclusion or recommendation. If it's asking you to justify or think critically, then you need to be providing evidence, okay? So that would be by using self-assessments, diagnostics, you know, any policies, procedures. You might want to refer to HSE guidelines or gov.uk, for example, or an act like legislation, for example. What critical means and what the higher level judgments are looking for is for you to be able to feed off other to provide a justified conclusion or recommendation for your organisation. You can also maybe refer back to other organisations that you've worked in. So you could say, you might be on a performance management unit, for example, and you might say, in the past, we've used one-to-one reviews monthly and set targets for individuals to monitor performance. You might then say, you know, now I've learned these tools and techniques, looking at key performance indicators and annual appraisals and setting smart objectives. I have now found that within these one-to-one reviews, all objectives will be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound, and planned out and agreed with both people. So as you can see, you'd be pulling from different elements of information, tools, techniques, and what you've learned to be able to provide a justified conclusion. And as I say, that can be done through working examples as well. So the conclusion, as I say here, is to state the most important feature of the argument. It's different than the assignment's conclusion. Just remember that. You conclude, and if it's asking you for a recommendation or a conclusion on a specific question, on a specific criteria, it's asking you to refer about what you've found from what you've learned in that question or in that answer. Is everyone with me on that? Does anyone have any questions on meeting the higher grades? I'll give you a little minute just to have a think about that, and then I'll ask you a few questions. Okay, so I've had a little look to answer your question, Luca. So let me just tell you, so if you're looking to provide a justified conclusion or your evidencing by using somebody else's theoretical model. So let's say, for example, you're talking about a specific leadership model or a specific leadership theory. So say, let's talk about Tenenberg and Smith's continuum model. If you're going to be talking about that, you need to avoid plagiarism. Now, you can paraphrase parts of what you've found. So you might read up something, find a little understanding and write up about it. But if you're talking about a specific model, tool or technique that somebody has spent years researching and designing for us to be able to improve our performance as a leader and a manager, you need to recognise that it's their work. So if you found a resource online, for example, that talks about Herzberg's motivational model, and you found loads on it and you think this is really interesting, I can use this in my assignment, that's fine, but you need to paraphrase you make sure that you're showing your understanding, you're not writing exactly what you found online. So you'll be using the direct, you'll be using citation, and there's guides on Moodle, there's a PDF and there's a video to help you with the Harvard referencing guide. But say you're using mindtools, for example.com, then you'd be putting the mindtools.com and then the date, and you put that in brackets in the paragraph in text where you've written about a specific model. Okay, then under that, on your reference list, you'll be providing a full reference of that, and we use the Harvard referencing system, which needs the author. If you don't know the author and you can't find it from a website, you put ND. But if you're referring to a specific model or a tool that's like being designed by one of the greats, you need to be referring to where their model was defined. And there's plenty of information on Moodle about that. We've got a huge PDF. We've got a live video like this that's being recorded where learners have asked questions throughout, and there's plenty of examples to help you with that. But yeah, if you want to get the good path, you want to be pulling off other people's ideas to provide your own ideas. You want to be justifying your recommendation and your conclusion with with critically by you know, forming, why have you formed that judgment? Well, I've formed that judgment because Herzberg has designed this motivational method that I think could work really well within my current workplace. For, you know, for this reason, I would recommend my company do X, Y, and Z in the future. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to implement that in the company tomorrow. It's just, you know, it's a recommendation. Some learners have completed units and assignments and went to the boss and said, this is what I've been doing, this is what I've found. And the bosses went, that is a really good, say, you know, personal development plan. We're going to start using that tomorrow in this workplace. So, you know, you can use what you've found, and we've got plenty of templates on our Moodle virtual learning environments that you can adapt and change yourself. You know, we're happy for you to do that. You know, we've got implementation plans, project management plans, marketing plans. We've got all sorts there that you can adapt and change and edit, and you know, your company might go, that's brilliant, we're going to start using that. So are you happy with that, Luca? Did it answer your question there? All good. Okay, so moving on, because I just looked at the time and thought, let's just move on. The marking sheet, okay, same as before. You need to add your name. You need to add your name, our name, Unicourse, and after the first assignment, I will complete on your first one your registration number and our code as well. From that, you need to make sure you're updating all them details. You'll have instructions for the assessments on there as well. You've got your sufficiency descriptors, which I've just discussed. The grades. Now, usually, if you're doing an ILM qualification, they either give you a numerical grade, so a percentage, or they give you pass, good pass, or referral. I give both. I think it's good to be able to see exactly where your points are missing. And I also think it's good to know exactly where you sit within the pass and the good pass. Let me just ask you a couple of questions now before I go any further with this. The next questions are, okay, have any learners used the assignment terminology guidance in the useful course resources tab that I spoke to about earlier? Now, this probably doesn't refer to new learners because you're not really there yet, but has anyone used the assignment terminology guidance that ILM provides? The second question, which is a short exercise, I'm going to give you in a second. I want you to read through and have a look at the sufficiency descriptors. Then from that, I want you to be able to reflect upon and self-mark and see whether you think it fits into a pass or a good pass. And I'm going to explain that a bit further for you. And then, okay, not finally in this section, the next questions. So just let me know your first outcome, and I'm going to show you now the short exercise, okay? Okay, so the question here is evaluate strategies to overcome barriers to effective managerial communication and interpersonal skills. Okay, so if you look at the referral, you look at the pass, and you look at the good pass. Sorry, let me just move this for you to make it easier for you to view. Sorry. Right, just read this criteria for me. Sorry, I thought this was all on one page. Let me make this a little bit smaller. Right, I'm hoping that you can all see that okay. Hi. So the first time I've tried to do an exercise on Zoom, so maybe it didn't flow as well as I like, but let me just explain to you. Did everyone get a chance to read? I hope everyone's got a chance to read it and got at least their thoughts on this one. If anyone needs any additional time, or I could just start explaining the answers to you, or how we would go about marking it. Is everyone happy for me to do that? Okay, I'm just going to continue on. Okay, it's probably just explaining it to you. Okay, so what I am looking for here, let me just make this a little bit bigger. So I am looking for, and I go straight to the good pass when I'm marking, and so do the IQ, by the way, the internal quality insurers and the external, verifiers, because they look what's missing before they look what's there. Okay, sorry, they look before they. So I am looking for two strategies that aren't the same to overcome about to effective management, communication, and interpersonal skills accurately and appropriately evaluated in relation to it. So the answer to question one would fit into the good pass category. The reason why is, one, you've got two barriers. So you've got a learning difficulty barrier, and then you've got a language barrier. So to make they're both dissimilar, they're not the same barriers. And then I would look for strategies. So have they thought about what would happen if it was ignored? What would happen if something was to, acted upon? What would be the downside? So when you're evaluating something, you're looking at the upside and then thinking about what your thoughts are. So, you'd be looking at that, and then, you'd be thinking about, well, I'd be thinking about when marking or when you're self-marking, you'd be looking at, has strategies been decided to overcome the management, communication, and now this is a word that's really important in your criteria. If it says and or, okay. So if it says and or, if it says or, it's either or. If it says and, you need both, okay? So it might ask you for a specific model and, and a tool, or it might ask you to talk about a specific theory or a technique. So you've got to really look at what the criteria is asking you to do. And often here as well, it'll tell you whether you need 2 examples or 3 examples. I would say in here, you need at least 2. And if they're similar, you're going to be getting the pass. So the second part here, answer 2, straight away you can notice that they're talking about barriers, but they're talking about a similar barrier here, accents and language barrier, and they're putting them in the same context, and they're providing strategies that are similar for both of them. So instantly, as soon as I start reading that, I'd say, right, well, that's not a dissimilar barrier, and it's not really dissimilar strategies, because it's all sort of related to the same thing. So that would instantly, to me, fall in the past. But then I'd be looking, right, okay, have they evaluated in relation to the associated barriers? So have you evaluated, provided the for and against, and although, if it is limited, if it's similar, then that's fine, but it would still only fit in that area. I'd also then look at the referral strategies to overcome barriers to effective managerial communication. Interpersonal skills are listed or described with no evaluation to provide a conclusion or recommendation. So you'd also be looking at that. So, there's a number of different things that you'd be looking at, what I'd be looking at when marking, but because there's been no clear evaluation in this, for me, answer 2, it would go to the referral, but more of the top marks of the referral, and I will give you specific guidance on where to go to elaborate further on that, okay? The third one, which I would, you've got 2 barriers, you've got 2 dissimilar barriers. So you've got cultural barriers, which links to, age, and then you've got the emotional barriers, which looks at mental health, and, looks at, which is clearly quite relevant today. But, you're going to be looking at the evaluation here. You'll be looking at, does it go into the good pass criteria? Now, what you're going to be looking at here is you're going to be saying, right, okay, so 2 or more dissimilar strategies, yes, to overcome the barriers to effective managerial communication, and interpersonal skills. Now, the thing with this one is it only briefly touches upon it, doesn't really evaluate them strategies in relation to them barriers. So that would also fall in, that would fall into the pass criteria for that one. Now, what I'll do, if you like, is I can send this out as an addition to the recording, which will be added onto Moodle if everything goes okay with it. And you just can have a little look a bit further into that, okay? We have a question. Do we get a chance to resubmit? Okay, so I'm just going to come to that. So let me just bring you back onto my presentation. Bear with me, Louise, you do. So none of you here have actually looked at the assessment terminology guidance. I would recommend going on to that, okay? Okay, so I am going to come on to what you've just said there, Louise, so just bear with me. So the difference between a referral pass and good pass will be clearly identified with a highlighter, and you will also see the top marks. So let me just give you this example to describe the goals and objectives of the organisation. For this particular person, this was referred at first, then they resubmitted and they got a pass for it. And this is the type of feedback that I will give. So for the first one, although I can see you understand you have part to play in meeting the goals and objectives, you've not made a clear distinction between them. Often using subheadings can help you to differentiate between them there. But as you can see, I clearly indicate where the points are that they're missing. And I also give forward feedback, so feed forwards to them to go and do something or get further resources on. Often is the case that I might even drop an email with a few additional resources if I really feel like they need additional help. If you do, you know, get one question referred, the whole assignment is referred. If you get 3 referrals from the questions, the whole assignment is referred as well. So it depends upon that really, as to how much guidance I give you on it. But as you can see, this person passed, and I've noted that it's good addition with the subheadings that defines. For the good pass, I would have liked to have seen SMART objectives specifically linked to each goal. So I tell you specifically where the areas are. So you've just completed that exercise, so that's fine. So moving back on to what Louise has just said. Every assignment brief has got a referral, a pass, and a good pass. Now, for the it's every unit and every assignment is different. So, for example, for the pass, you might need 50% on one, you might need 60% on another. It depends how many points they actually give you for each unit, and whether they give you, say, 4 out of 5 for a referral, or 5 out of 7 for the pass. But usually if you get over 50%, you'll pass for each unit. If you get less than 50%, it's a referral. But usually when people get a referral, it's based on just one learning criteria. It's just one question not being met, or one learning outcome not being met. So it'll usually be a higher percentage, but just with that one missing that they need to work on, really. Okay. The good pass is usually over 75 to 80%, depending on the numbers for each learning outcome. Is everyone with me there? Let me just say, can we fail an assignment? How common is it based on your own experience? What happens if you do some? So to be completely honest with you, people that aren't used to writing assignments may get an assignment referred first time. People that aren't used to following criteria and worked academically for a while might just need a little bit more feedback. But, you know, I do offer to mark the first draft. All I can say is once people have completed 1 or 2 units, they sort of know how to use the criteria to be able to self-mark and be confident in the submissions. Hope that's answered your question there, Luca. So I'm conscious of the time now, so I'm going to just point out 1 or 2 things. So a referral does not mean you have failed the unit fully. It means you've got more work to do. Key points: read the comments, and I will put lots of feedback in text in your assignment, and I'll also put feedback on the marking sheet. Make additions and highlight on your resubmission where them additions are, so I can clearly focus on what you've added. When you resubmit, you've got to send a resubmission form, and if you're going to save your resubmission in all of your uploads here folder, call it resub. So it might be Ashley Lloyd unit 400 resub. You might want to put a date on that. Your first one might just be Ashley Lloyd unit 400 assignments. So, and then your resubmission, we say within 2 weeks. Now, obviously, if you need some additional support over the phone and we can't get talking on the phone, or you need me to talk through your feedback, then it might take a little bit longer, but give yourself a maximum of 2 weeks, otherwise information starts dropping from your mind. And finally, before submitting, proofread for spelling, grammar and punctuation, self-mark using the criteria, check the sufficiency descriptors, say to yourself, am I in the good pass area? Am I in the pass area? Or do I just need to add something on there? Check your cover page is well formatted, your content page is up to date, and you've added the date that you're submitting. Add any appendices and check the reference list is formatted well. And any appendices you might want to add in an additional folder in your Dropbox so you can use again for other assignments. Complete your details on the assignment brief, so just make sure your name is on there, and add to Dropbox with the completed assignments in all of your uploads to your folder, and then complete the submission form on Moodle. So that's the guidance there. Does anyone have any questions for me?